Hello, thanks for stopping by today. I'm cooking up some victuals in the kitchen, and today I'm doing some stuff that's been passed down in my family for probably over 100 years. My grandmother, she taught my mother to cook, and my mother in turn taught me to cook. And we come from West Virginia, in the heart of the Appalachian Mountains. We're going to go for a journey today through those mountains and enjoy some food the way country folk like to eat. I'm going to attribute all of my recipes to my great-grandmother, Lily Missouri Klein, who taught me everything I know about cooking. They lived in the head of Klein Holler in Endor, West Virginia, and Lily and Black Leg was their name. And they got the house from her parents, Moses and Virginia Klein. Well, I'm going to start today doing a beetroot salad. I took a beet out of my garden, and I used my slaw grater, and I used the side of it where it cuts it like potato chips, and that's how I cut all my vegetables today. And isn't it beautiful? I love the collars. And then the piece that I couldn't cut with my grater, I just shredded it in long strings to give it a really good crunchy consistency. And I used onion, carrot, beet, and cabbage. I used about a cup of cabbage and a cup and a half of beet. It was just one large beet out of our garden. And then last night I had some baby back ribs, and I put some season on those last night and rub and put that in the refrigerator. And then today all of that had soaked up, so I sprinkled a little bit more of that on there. And then I have my oven heated up at 225, and I'm going to put those in there and bake them low and slow today. I love ribs. Anything that's made like that has seasoning on it. I'm not too much of a big meat eater, but I cook it all the time for my family. Now these got pretty good amount of meat on them. I'd say there's 5 pounds of meat there. Well, half of it's bones. You know how it goes. And then I had a pan of leftover cornbread last night. We only ate 2 pieces of the cornbread, so I took that cornbread and crumbled it up in my hands and added 1 chopped up onion, which ended up being 1 cup, 1 cup of chopped celery, 2 tablespoons of rubbed sage, and 1 tablespoon of poultry seasoning. And this is 1/4 of a stick of butter melted and 3 tablespoons of better than bouillon. And this gives it a real deep flavor, as if you had boiled your chicken today and used the broth from that. Grandma used to always make dressing when she made her dumplings, and she would use part for the dressing and part for the dumplings because they almost always had leftover cornbread at the house. That's what we would eat at night as a snack, was leftover cornbread and a raw onion. Me and my mama would sit there at night. She'd send me out to get a raw onion out of the shed, and we would sit in there and cut that in half and share a pile of salt at night with cold cornbread. I love anything that I can use that's left over. I don't waste anything in my kitchen. Now just stir this up really good, and you're going to bake this on 350 in the oven. Here in the mountains, I cook a lot of things that come out of the garden. Like today, I used the onion. I had celery from the store. I used the beet in our salad. I'm going to have some lettuce later on this evening. You know, if you have things out of the garden, why not use it? Now, this is about 10 or 12 saltine crackers, and I'm just crumbling them up with my hands and putting them in there. And I also put in about 1/4 cup of parsley flakes, because this is a lot of stuffing. This will make 2 or 3 pans, and it would be perfect to make in pans and freeze it up. And when you get it out, just bake it. And you would have fresh stuffing ready to eat, individual aluminum foil containers in the freezer. And always put a date and the name of whatever you've just put away. Now I'm using 1 slice of bread, and I'm just going to break that off and pinch it in the smallest pieces I can get so that the texture will dissolve in the chicken broth and give it a yummy consistency. Without the bread, it almost falls apart. It don't fall apart, but it's crumbly. And if you like crumbly dressing, leave out the crackers and the bread. But 10 crackers and a slice of bread is not a whole lot. I just want something to make it stick together. I don't use a lot of flour. There was a little bit of flour in my cornbread. The cornbread is a cup and a half of cornmeal. I use a cast iron skillet, cup and a half of cornmeal, 1 cup of buttermilk, 1 egg, and I always use self-rising flour and cornmeal. Now this is my sage, 2 tablespoons, 1 teaspoon of poultry seasoning, salt, and pepper. And that's all you put in this. The egg will help it bind, so will the cracker. And when you bake this up in the oven, your whole family's going to love it. And it smells like I got a carnival in there in my kitchen right now. I've been in there cooking. And I've got ribs in the oven baking. I have dressing in the oven baking. I have a sweet potato casserole in the oven baking. So now I'm getting my skillet all greased up just with a fine uh, bead in a good cast iron skillet that doesn't stick. And I have done seasoned this thing over and over and over. You just put it on the stove, and if there's anything stuck in it, you just have to put a lot of heat under it. And if you burn that skillet until it starts to smoke, everything in it will burn out. And then you take spray canola and a paper towel, and you spritz that in a hot skillet, and put that in your oven and let that bake on 300 for about an hour. And you'll have one of the best coated over skillets that ever was. And when you get it out, coat it again. And sometimes I'll heat mine on the stove for a while because that sets that canola oil in there. And when you burn it, that gets it out. That's the only thing that'll get it out. Okay, now I'm making a Jello salad for dessert. And so I'm using 1/3 of a stick of cream cheese softened in the microwave and 1 cup of boiling water to a large package of strawberry jello, 1 can of cranberry sauce, and a half a cup of nuts. And then later, when I get all this dissolved and whipped up in there real good, I'm going to put in 1 can of peaches. And then we'll have something cold and yummy and tangy, and that it also fits the theme of the meal. Oh, this is good. You're going to like this recipes. All this stuff is just simple stuff that came down from my mom. She was a oldest sister of 8 kids, and she had to learn how to cook to help her mom, and boy, was she a good one. Now I'm just trying to get all them lumps out of there from the cranberry sauce and the cream cheese, and once you get it all blended up, I dump in my strained peaches, and then I'm going to throw in about a half a cup of nuts, and then stir all this up, put a saran wrap over it, and put it in the refrigerator for our dessert tonight. You're really going to like these recipes. Now this next thing coming up is a very simple, out of the can, very large container of sweet potatoes. They were called Yams. And I put a half a cup of sugar, 1/4 cup of white, 1/4 cup of brown sugar, uh, half a teaspoon of salt, some panko breadcrumbs, and some pumpkin pie spice. I didn't have any cinnamon, so I used pumpkin pie spice and a half a stick of melted butter. And I took a half a cup of nuts and mixed that in there. And the panko and the nuts creates the crunch, and the sugar and the brown sugar creates the taste, and it turns into a yummy topping. It's delicious. I was just looking for something out of the box, something that was very tasty, something that had a zip and a zing to it, a crunch. And I found these ingredients and thought that I would take you guys for a trip along with me today through the Appalachian Mountains, cooking some old-timey country meals. Now, I just put in a teaspoon of vanilla over my yams, and I had left about probably 2 tablespoons of the yam juice in there, a quarter stick of butter, and I'm going to mix that around in there so I get that vanilla down in there with all of it. And then I squirted in about 3 tablespoons of pancake syrup, and I'm breaking up some of them real large yams, and so that the flavor will get down inside of them. And then I'll put the crunchy topping over top of all that, and I'm just pushing them down in there so they'll all get some of the sauce. And then I'm just going to sprinkle all this topping and spread it out over the top so that everything gets covered. And then I'm going to bake this in the oven at 350 degrees. I like the simpler the recipes, the better, don't you? Now I have the ribs in the oven, and they're going to bake low and slow for probably 6 hours. And I'll turn them up to 250 the last hour or so. And that'll make them brown on the outside a little better without drying them out. Bake this at 350 until golden brown. The dressing to the salad is simple and delicious, and I made it and put it in the refrigerator to let it blend and start to get all the seasonings to release and develop. It takes overnight for them to be delicious, but I'm going to eat it after about 4 hours. Now to get started on some green beans. I had about a quart of fresh green beans in the refrigerator that I had cooked, and I added a half of an onion and 2 slices of ham and a tablespoon of butter. I added 1 quart of beans that I had canned to stretch my green beans, so now I have 2 quarts of green beans cooked in the same fresh green bean juice. Now I had to transfer my casserole, my cranberry salad, over into another casserole dish. So I took the casserole dish out of the cabinet, greased it, put the jello in there, put in 1 cup of rehydrated cranberries, and this is the topping for that. It is 1/2 cup of sour cream, 1/2 cup of cottage cheese, 1/2 cup of cream cheese, 1/2 cup of ricotta cheese, 1 teaspoon of vanilla, and 1/2 cup of yogurt, vanilla yogurt. Now the green beans are continuing to boil, and they are nothing but green beans, onion, and ham. And the longer they sit, the better they get. If they're in the refrigerator, they are just blending and making more intense flavors. Those are my baby back ribs, my stuffing, and my casserole dish. This is the baby back ribs. They were absolutely phenomenal. There's nothing better than just down home cooking like Grandma used to cook. So y'all stop by my channel again tomorrow and check out my new videos. I've been downloading all new videos of my cooking, and all my recipes are homemade, made from scratch, and usually things out of my garden.